All right. Well, first episode. Welcome to Outsourced Alpha. Very excited, long awaited. I am Derek Shanahan for those that don't know me, which is great. I hope you do soon. I'm with Juniper Square. And since this is episode one, I wanted to set the stage and go over some very quick housekeeping on why this show exists. So, fund managers and service providers around them. There's a lot of content. And what I wanted to bring to the table was something more authentic. So nothing scripted, no vendor pitches, no one trying to sell you something. And the idea of having practitioners that I'm lucky enough in my role of interacting with almost on a daily basis about what's changing in the industry, what you should be doing about it, and what to be on the lookout for the back half of this year as everything's moving at a crazy clip right now. So Dana has been kind enough to join us today as our first guest. And Dana's one of my favorite people in the industry. So she's sitting at the intersection of generative AI and audit at PwC. And we've crossed paths, fortunately, a number of times. And every time we have a conversation, I leave and a number of questions come to mind that I should have asked and I didn't, which is the best way for me to know that it's worth bringing somebody on as a guest to Outsourced Alpha. So there you go. There's the litmus test. So here's what's been rattling around in my head, and then we'll sort of set the stage for Dana to introduce herself and go into a little bit of a conversation here. The audit profession and the general landscape of public accounting is built on certainty. And as you probably know, is the last line of defense between what a fund says is true and what is actually true. So you have to balance those two. Now, lately, as you're probably aware, you have AI accelerating quite literally everything around a fund, whether it's investor relations, whether it's compliance, whether it's treasury. Frankly, very few people expected the clip at which it would be adopted, and guardrails need to be put in place. So my fundamental question is, and we can get into this in a little bit, does that make the audit function stronger? Does it sharpen the pencil? What GPs are asking of their public accounting service providers and centers of influence in the space. And so there's a lot we can go through, but that's generally why I thought Dana would be a great guest, very savvy and just excellent in her own right. So it's enough for me. Dana, I'd love to just have you introduce yourself for folks who don't know you, and I hope they get to know you soon, and what you're focused on today, especially after busy season recently wrapped up. And I'm glad you made it through that.
Thank you so much, Derek. I'm really excited to be with you here today. Really excited to be with Juniper Square talking about this really important topic. So I'm Dana Van Wie. I'm an assurance partner out of our New York office. For the last 17 years, dating myself a little bit, I've been in the real estate and alternatives space in assurance. But in the last 3 years, my role has really changed as a traditional audit partner. I've become heavily involved in our go-to-market strategy for AI, not only as PwC seeks to transform the way we think about the audit process and the way we deliver all of our services to our clients, but what does that mean for our clients in the industry, particularly in asset and wealth management? And it's interesting having those conversations out in the market. Everybody has kind of a different viewpoint. And so part of what I do is I'm out there talking to everybody, gathering those perspectives, sharing mine and sharing best practices and challenges as I go.
Very cool. And we were just talking about some of your upcoming trips. I know we both travel a lot, so I hope you have safe travels, but you're speaking with a variety of people, many of whom have a thorough understanding of the public accounting world, many of whom are perhaps looking at an auditor for the first time. Starting broad, what is the general state of public accounting nowadays, and what trends have you seen working, for better or worse in your favor at PwC?
Yeah, so the industry is really at an inflection point. What audit is today, what it was 15 years ago is not what it's going to be 2, 3, 5 years from now. And that's because of a number of forces at work. First of all, even before the advent of ChatGPT and all the AI hype, we were at sort of a crisis. The number of college students that were graduating with accounting degrees and then going on to obtain their CPA, it was becoming less and less. And then technology hit the scene, whereas before, the traditional kind of audit team setup we have is very hierarchical, right? And we hire a lot of first year entry level employees to learn the business, tick and tie, do a lot of kind of data processing, data wrangling, data management so that they can push all that up to the middle layers of management and then ultimately up to the partners that are really making the judgment calls. All of that, the original problem, probably COVID, definitely brought in additional challenges and kind of amplified this accounting major crisis, CPA crisis. Plus, technology has forced the industry as a whole to really change and transform. And I see it as an opportunity, all this technology that's on the scene. The technology is going to allow us to transform and grow in totally different ways so that we don't have to always be thinking about, okay, I've got to hire more people to do the work, but how can I hire the right people and have the right technology tools to do the work and deliver the audit in a different way to our clients such that they feel a big difference in the audit process at the end of the day. So it's a really exciting time to be a part of the profession. And I also think, there's so much going on in the news cycle as far as like, oh, AI is going to replace accounting, replace finance professionals. I just think that that's so short-sighted. It's clickbait, really, in my opinion. What AI is going to do is really going to accelerate the time it takes to get to the judgment point and the inflection point. So that's going to make things much more exciting.
I'm with you. I mean, the conversations we have are wild in that everybody's trying to do more with less, whether it's more LP relationships, a more complex fund structure across jurisdictionally, more regulatory service area. There's a lot going on there. And I think there's a world in which everybody moves from a generalist mindset to being able to train models and use products and platforms, regardless of what it is that is purpose built for private funds. So where are GPs starting that journey, in your opinion? Are they starting with data? Are they starting with practical use cases and application? Where are you seeing like the median GP on the market behave right now with a lot of these new trends?
Yeah, I'm gonna take that in a couple different pieces. First, I would say the first point you made, everybody's trying to do more with less. That I think really started 5 to 7 years ago, where traditional fund managers started to expand out into different product types. People are growing rapidly, so they need their service providers to grow rapidly with them, and then infuse technology and this technology disruptor into all of that. And a lot of people approach that with fear, but I think we all have to approach that with opportunity. Like, great, I can really do more with less now if I really rethink my workflows and I rethink the way I've traditionally done things to infuse technology in with my core people that have the domain expertise that know how to do things the right way in accordance with, XYZ organization style. So I think that that's absolutely true. And we've felt that in the accounting profession. Every single year, our clients have grown exponentially and they want us to grow with them, but they don't want the cost to grow, right? So how does technology play into keeping the costs down? And when I'm talking to GPs, they're never asking me, hey, Dana, how do I use technology to cut my headcount? I've never been asked that question in the last 3 years, not once. It's how do I use technology to drive efficiencies, to drive employee satisfaction? Like, how do I cut down on the overtime that my people are spending on, these 5 tasks? How do I make this task, this job more enjoyable? Those are the questions that I'm getting, not can I just cut headcount? People are not thinking about it that way. But for a GP that's thinking about just getting started, how should they do that? And how do I see it kind of playing out? People are typically starting with use cases, right? They're like, okay, what are some practical use cases that we're seeing out there? And that's not necessarily wrong. I think that allows GPs to get a flavor for what are others doing in the industry, what's worked already that could work in my organization. But I think then once you kind of understand where these use cases are really taking root, it's doubling back to think about, well, all right, well, where's my data? Where does that all sit? Is it clean? Is it usable? And then what's my governance structure that's going to support and oversee this whole thing from start to finish? And then that's when you start to think about, okay, what vendors do I need to pair up with in order to get going on this? And Derek, a lot of GPs will talk to me about, well, should I be buying a product or should I be building it in-house? And look, I would say for people in the middle of the industry, should be thinking about buying. Like a lot of asset managers don't have these robust IT departments, right? So while it's important to use domain expertise and infuse that into these tools, you can do that with a frontier model and then working with that for like specific GP use cases once that's in your environment.
Absolutely. It's interesting. Humans now, as we say, moving up the abstraction stack, whereas you have an individual contributor no longer doing the work, more or less orchestrating agents. And before anything goes out the door, having an expert in the loop. But the question of human capital has become super interesting to us is you sort of have this cold start problem, as we've been talking about, where how do you train entry-level staff? How do you get them engaged and actually learning the motions and critical thinking as opposed to just jumping to the end and not showing their work? So that's a problem that many people are trying to solve for. I guess, where are you seeing the evolution of talent in the public accounting space, absence of a bunch of people trying to get a bachelor's in accounting and go the traditional route? Are you seeing anything more creative or more interesting on that side of the market?
I'll start off by saying I don't have a silver bullet to this. I think this is one of the most important questions, though, Derek, and where things are really going to have to evolve quickly. And the people that crack this code are going to be the winners at the end of the game versus those that are not thoughtfully thinking this through. But I think fundamentally how we train and onboard new members of our teams has to change and shift. I'm going to steal an example that one of my colleagues always uses when we're talking with boards and management teams is, when we first started out in our first year in public accounting, we were licking envelopes and sending confirms to banks. And now that could have been your entire busy season. Now, if you fast forward 10 years, all of that is automated, right? So now, our associates, instead of licking the envelopes, they're evaluating the results that they're getting back from banks and they're identifying issues quicker. They're spending more time going back and forth with the confirming party. So that wasn't a scary shift, right? Like that's not a scary shift. But I think people are thinking, okay, AI is really going to wipe out all of this kind of like fundamental learning that my new hires generally get from really being in the weeds on the job. And I think what companies have to do is they need to be training those new hires with your kind of middle management employees quicker, sooner. There's going to be less hand-holding. There's probably going to be higher expectations for those individuals. But also, like, on the positive side of things, like, who liked licking envelopes? Like, not me. I didn't want to do that, I would come home and I would complain to my parents at the time, my friends at the time, that I was spending all day wasting my degree on that kind of stuff. So on the flip side of things, on the positive side of things, I think college grads or entry-level employees, they're going to be able to put their degree to work right away. So it's just the pace is going to change.
I'm with you. Human capital is a hot topic, and I couldn't agree more that although learning to do a task through mundane, repetitive work is one way to figure something out, you can also have a much more efficient means of enablement. And I think that's where the industry is settling on. But TBD. And if you get it wrong early on in the formative years, it's tough to fix that, which is the other issue. Well, let's move over to the client side of this perspective. And you work with a lot of funds, from emerging to institutional, from a CFO to a COO, a lot of different personalities and different perspectives. So I guess two questions. The first of which is, what are people worried about that maybe they shouldn't be paying that much attention to? And I guess flip that on its head, what are some folks not paying attention to that might actually warrant a little bit more scrutiny nowadays when it comes to this rush of technology into the market?
I'm going to start with the second part of that question, which is what are people not focused on that they should be? And it would be like, as a part of these technology conversations, we're always talking about the tools, right? And that's really important, obviously, to understand the capabilities of these tools and how it's transforming in other people's environments. But what people are missing the boat on a lot of the times is that the end-to-end workflow is where most of the bang for your buck is going to come from. So what I mean by that is, the technology tool is maybe 20% of the effort, but really where you're going to get the efficiencies, where you're going to get the ROI is workflow transformation end to end. And looking at a process and saying, hey, should this really be set up this way in the first place? Yes or no? Rather than trying to just take a technology tool and jamming it into a process where it might not be fit for purpose. I see that all the time, really. And I see there, especially at the end of 2025 and into Q1 of 26, a lot of CFOs and COOs, you could tell there was a lot of anxiety in our space around, okay, well, I've got to use AI. I've got to harness it. I'm putting it into practice, but they're not always putting it in the best places, right? You really have to think through where is the right place for this to go, and maybe a whole bunch of other steps along the way need to change along with it. And that's what's really going to give you the transformation. That's going to give you the lasting change versus somebody that's just trying to jam a tool down their employees' throats. So, the other thing that I think people underestimate a lot is access to a tool does not mean folks are actually going to pick it up and use it. I hear that all the time from CFOs and CTOs that are saying, we rolled out all these cool new things. They have great dashboards, but people are not buying into it. Why not? And there could be a lot of reasons for that. I think number one, it's upskilling and education is people are missing the boat on that. Number one. Number two, tone at the top. Huge, huge. There needs to be a really consistent tone at the top about what your firm is trying to do with technology, how you're trying to change, and what that means for the employee. How are expectations changing? How are they going to be measured and evaluated using these technology tools? For us at PwC, for example, that's part of what you're evaluated on. You're evaluated on whether or not you're on strategy, you're using tools, firm-approved tools, obviously, and you're using them in accordance with business rules that are clearly defined for the individual. And I think a lot of those pieces are missing in a lot of fund shops that I speak to. And that's an easy fix. Like, somebody just needs to sit down with some of their, kind of strategic operating committee to decide, how do we want to do this and how do we want to talk about this to our entire workforce so that we encourage adoption. And we encourage also those employees to think through, well, what are good use cases in their day-to-day? So you want to be able to encourage that as well.
I'm with you. It's a lot of good best practices. And one question that came to mind as you were describing this is a very nascent technology, as we know, and using AI tools for the first time is error prone, there's liability. How does an audit firm using AI audit a firm also using AI when you sort of can't see fully inside what they're up to or trace back to their original workflows? How does that actually work now with these new technologies from your point of view?
Yeah, I think it goes back to really understanding workflows and the end-to-end business process. And there's really nobody better to help a firm with that than their auditors, because we already know that. We already know everybody. We have all of that documented. That was already a documentation requirement of years past. So Now, once a firm infuses technology or changes a process, let's say they're changing their AP process, we are in the door alongside of that firm, understanding, okay, what did you change? Okay, you're infusing technology here, you're using a new tool here, but how did your controls change around inputs and outputs? And okay, you're using a vendor here. Do they have a SOC 2 that you're going to be relying on, that we would be relying on? It's asking different questions than before, right? And I think people are not necessarily used to thinking through a process start to finish, because our industry as a whole was plagued by kind of like legacy data, legacy processes that people didn't really pay that much attention to. But now it's a game changer. It's a must. It's table stakes to be thinking this through and getting this right. So audit firms, accounting firms, do we need to be asking those questions of our clients constantly so we understand, okay, how are risks changing? How are controls changing? And how can we help you think through what should change along with it, or where you may have gaps in the process now?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of good points there. And I think one of the interesting things that you mentioned is you guys are very familiar with workflows and tasks that go on. You're able to scrutinize those. Part of the advent of generative AI and the application of it is breaking down what is one repetitive menial task that somebody's doing again and again, automating that, measuring the base that as baseline, and then extending that into a whole workflow. And I think there's a simple exercise that people can do right off the bat, as opposed to try to recreate the entire wheel or rebuild the factory, as we call it. So that brings me to a question of when GPs are interviewing an auditor. Let's say it's a first time GP and they don't know much about the public accounting world. They don't know what a good tax partner or a good audit partner brings to the table. What are some fundamental questions they can be asking to make sure they're vetting out capabilities and technology and then balancing that with really good people and service? Well, what's a good conversation they can have?
GPs should absolutely be empowered to be asking their audit and tax providers, how are you using AI as a part of delivering my service? How are you changing the way we interact on a daily basis? So, the way we think about that in the audit process is, how are we better automating data exchange, right? Like, gone are the days of just emailing across PBCs and client request documents. Is there an better way to get that information without disrupting a shop's, full accounting team for the day? Like that, how do we ease the burden of the audit and tax process? That should be a question that GPs are absolutely asking. And if a firm's response is, we're exploring AI, just hang up the phone, stop the meeting, move on, because that just can't be the answer anymore. It has to be, we're using it here. These are our business. Here's how we train our people. Here's what our people have to do when they get an output out of something. And I think that that's really important to poke on too. What are your people doing when they get outputs out of these models? Like, how are they checking it? How are they validating the sources? Because I have those discussions all the time with our teams to say, you can't just take what you're getting out of these models at face value. There can't be this data automation bias, which is really hard, by the way, because the way these models and these tools are set up, they're set up to be helpful assistants. They make you feel good about the questions that you're asking. Anytime I'm going in, even for like a contract review, if I'm putting in an LPA document or an OM and I'm iterating with it and asking questions, the tool is gassing me up. It's saying like, great question, Dana. That's such a good follow-up. It's making me feel good about it. And it's making me feel like their response to whatever I'm asking is validating, right? So what I always challenge my teams to do is, you can't just take any of this at face value. You got to tie it back into the guidance. You got to tie it back to a client contract and make sure that you're spending your time there versus spending your time, in years past of pulling together the contracts, extracting the key terms, putting it into a Word document or Excel. Now my teams can spend time really analyzing specific points of a contract or whatever it is that they're doing. They're spending less time with that data wrangling piece. So Derek, that was like a long-winded way of saying we're transforming at PwC. I know others are transforming as well. So GPs should be asking really specific questions about, well, what does that mean? What does that mean for my data? And what does that mean about our day-to-day interactions?
Yeah, the sycophantic AI model, I think it's good on certain days when you're having a rough day, but by and large, you need honest feedback and you need it to be objective and truthful. And, when GPs are asking their service providers, whether it's us, yourselves, or anybody, these questions, it's, what's your AI roadmap? What have you actually shipped? What are you building out like in the near future? I think the vague answers that almost speak like a riddle, like we're exploring AI, we're good at prompt engineering, that are really non-specific. To your point earlier, it just doesn't fly anymore. Maybe it flew back in 2023 when everybody was trying to figure it out, but that's just no longer the case. So it's all good points. As we wrap up, I know we didn't cover everything. We can talk for hours about this, but maybe you could touch on one or two things that didn't come up naturally and you would love for the audience to take away from this conversation, whether it's a best practice, something they can start doing today. Feel free. This is an open forum here.
Yeah. So what I would tell the audience is don't be afraid to jump in, right? Don't have this kind of analysis paralysis. I see a lot of fund shops really struggling with, okay, do I build versus buy? Where do I start with my use cases? I have 10 identified, but I just don't know where to start. And I would just say, start, do it, jump in, start doing something, because what you're going to do by just starting is you're going to start to build a muscle that you're going to need for the coming years, which is going to be kind of this onslaught of change and transformation. So I would encourage those, don't be fearful, pick a vendor, talk to your service providers about what they already have. A lot of service providers like a Juniper Square, like PwC, we already offer a lot of great tools as a part of what we do and how we interact with our clients every single day. But there are a lot of vendors that clients already have in-house that are offering agentic workflows, agents as a part of their software packages or software upgrades. Lean into that. Don't overcomplicate your tech stack if you don't have to. Maybe you have tons of vendors out there that you're already using that have these really cool new tools that you haven't necessarily bought into yet. Do it, explore it. Obviously, you want to go through your whole quality control review, but start to move forward on that, because you're going to get yourself as an organization more comfortable with these changes and more comfortable with changing your workflows. So the sooner the better. I would say you just got to dive in and do it, and don't be afraid. If you're afraid, that means you're thinking about things the right way because you're worried about governance, right? So you probably already have that down. So move forward with starting to transform, because those that are on like still the wait and see path are really going to stay there while others overtake.
I hear you. And guys, listen to Dana. She's smart. You should be doing exactly what she says in that order. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to her. Dana, let's wrap up with something you're interested in and are rather excited about personally over the next few months. What do you got going on? Any summer travel plans? Anything you want to share? What's getting you through the work week right now?
It is hopefully summer soon. I'm in New Jersey, so it really doesn't seem like summer right now, but I'll be anywhere that has a beach, really. So anybody that wants to invite me to a beach, I'll go. So I am excited to be taking some time out with friends and family, but also excited now that we're out of, my traditional audit busy season, to be hitting the road and talking to our clients about this really exciting topic, because I think 2026 is going to be a year of big change. People are they're comfortable with the topic now. They're ready to really do big new things, and I'm excited to be on that journey with people.
I love it. And you're always welcome in Southern California. We have beautiful beaches. So feel free to come on out. And I'll see you in New York in June. Thank you so much. This has been wonderful. And if anybody wants to reach out, Dana's profile will be linked to the episode and we can end it with that. So thank you all for the time.